Hey everyone, this is Kenny Coins with Marathon Money Inside the Ticker, and guess what? I'm back. I'm back with Keith. So many people has asked me what's going on. Like, can we get an update? So we got Keith back on the show. He's gonna give an update. What's coming up in the for this year 2026. A lot of news came out. You guys are hitting the space with uranium. Am I correct?
Yep, correct.
So can you elaborate on that exploration?
Yeah, certainly. So, as we discussed last time, we were eagerly awaiting to get drilling at our Denison joint venture projects, Murphy Lake North and Darby. Well, now we've officially started drilling. We started just over a month ago, focusing on both our Darby and Murphy Lake North projects. That is the most exciting time of the year for an exploration company like us because that is our biggest catalyst, the drill bit. If we have success with drilling, that could really catapult us from both a value standpoint and just as a company overall. And so we look forward to it every year. We have a healthy treasury. We have great targets we're drilling. We obviously have strong support from our joint venture partner Denison Mines, and we're eager to update the market as we progress. But we have a big drilling campaign planned throughout the entirety of 2026, focusing on those two key projects.
With everything going on in the world with uranium and the war and stuff like that, what is if you guys do strike? What is the major play after that?
Yeah, so it's something interesting is that we talked about this last time is that our team, COSA is somewhat of a newer story, but we are a team that's really been involved with multiple discoveries in the past. And ISO Energy, we're involved with Denison. Part of our team is involved with NextGen initially. The one thing we haven't been able to time is having that success during a uranium bull market. And so we've managed to even have success even in somewhat of a poor uranium market. And so if you do have success in this market with the tailwinds in the uranium space, you could see your share price react extremely in a positive direction for sure. And it's going to be very important for companies like us to really have that success here in this what I view as a long-term uranium bull market. And so yeah, I'm very excited. Like I said, we've managed to have success even in bad markets, and for us to be able to time a uranium bull market, and if we have success with the drill bit, I mean, it would be something that I've never experienced before, as we're having that success when the tailwinds are behind you in the uranium space.
So can you tell us, like, for the people out there, like for the investors and the people that has invested in a company, what does determine a really good uranium market? I mean, like, why is it very important right now, and why is the growth of uranium very important right now?
Yeah, so it's been building in the background for almost the past 20 years. You've just seen the uranium demand increasing over time, but yet the price of it's remained depressed. And on the supply side, you saw a very undercapitalized side of the industry where there was really not a whole lot of new mines being built online. There wasn't that much exploration success because there was, it was very undercapitalized. And so it's kind of created this perfect storm here where you have, the supply and demand gap, which is kind of normal fundamentals for metal, but you have this newfound demand that is coming into the uranium space, where you have new jurisdictions entering the nuclear power industry. You have small modular reactors. You have strategic supplies of countries kind of bifurcating where they really want to have access to their own uranium, and it's created, like I said, this perfect storm where the current supply cannot meet the current demand. But when you pile in all this future demand upcoming, it could cause the uranium price to really go parabolic, honestly, with how much it could rise to. And so it is a somewhat small industry, especially from a supply standpoint. And so when that happens, you'll see a massive uplift of the names that are involved in it, because it's not something like precious metals or gold or copper, where you do have a lot more names to choose from. There's a limited amount of names that you'd want to invest in uranium, and so it creates this almost amazing environment where you can see valuations of these companies that are gigantic.
Would you also say uranium is very scarce? Not a lot of people. There's not a lot out there. I know you mentioned that a little bit ago that there's not a lot there, and with what's going on with like data centers, the more energy we need, obviously things are technology wise is extremely moving faster. So companies like yours who are exploring uranium, there's a massive big advantage if you guys do discover it. And looking at your history and the people that you have teamed on, I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, how, if you discovered it in bad markets, like how confident do you feel as somebody that's running the company that's probably going to discover it in a really good market? You know.
Yeah, I think just to answer those, definitely, I have full confidence in my team. We've had a whole bunch of success in this space. We're looking to do it again here with Cosa Resources, and I think that we are undergoing what's going to be a long-term uranium bull market. Probably, I think the strongest bull market we've ever had in the uranium space. I'm fairly confident in that, just based on, as you mentioned, all those data centers, all this new demand that is coming down the line of asking for nuclear power, and then on the supply side, it is scarce. It's been an undercapitalized industry for the past 15, 20 years, and it's not like other commodities where there's a whole bunch of projects that are kind of sitting ready to come online when the price gets to a certain level. That that doesn't exist in uranium. Those projects haven't been found, a lot of them. And you look at the Denisons, next gens of the world, where they've both received their permits to start construction on. That's a fantastic result for Saskatchewan and Canada, that these projects are going to go ahead and be built. But those discoveries are made in like 2008, around 2013, 14, and so that's a while ago now. And so then those next great discoveries have to happen here to catch up with this demand. And so COSA's in a great position here, where exploration is going to be a key player in this uranium bull market, because we're so far behind in that part of the uranium supply standpoint, and it takes a while to get these mines into production. But you need these big discoveries like the Denisons, the next gens of the world, ISO, when we were there, because those are the ones that can really help provide a huge injection of supply into the growing demand. And so I think that's what makes us unique. And we're also kind of in this area, the Athabasca Basin in Saskatchewan, Canada. Saskatchewan is a fantastic jurisdiction for uranium mining. And it's also fortunate to have this unique geological area where the average grade of uranium deposit outside of that part of the world is like 0.2%, 0.1%. The average grade of the Hurricane deposit that we found during our time at ISO Energy in 2018 is 35% uranium. So 0.2 to 35%. So it's this very unique sector, uranium, where you have this area of the world, the Athabasca Basin, where companies are competing to make those next significant discoveries, because those mines in that part of the world are the ones that can really help meet the growing demand.
Yeah, the demand for uranium exploding. Nuclear is obviously there's a war. Nuclear is very important to everybody in this country, definitely to lead world leaders. Um, one thing I do would like to know, once you make that discovery, once you get some uranium, what is the development that we should be looking out for? I know it's going to probably it might take you an entire year to really discover it, but what should investors look out for after you discover, uranium, and you hit that, you strike gold, pretty much? What's the next move?
Yeah, so the good news with us is that we've been through it before, right? We have a good blueprint. We obviously learned a lot with our past companies. So basically, when you do have that success, you really start to make sure that the news gets out there. You start getting on the radar of larger institutions, larger financial firms. You start to really focus on portraying to the market that we could be onto something major here. And then from an exploration standpoint, you have to take the approach of figuring out how much do you have. Obviously, you have that initial hit. Now you need to start drilling within that area to determine, okay, how large is this potential discovery that we made. And with us, we bring a track record of being able to do that cost effectively and really quickly, so that you can get to that next stage because you do need that initial resource before you can start going through the study process of deciding whether you want to get into development. But the beauty of that is if you make a discovery, your share price will react accordingly. When we were at ISO Energy, we went from 30 cents to $6 in 18 months. That was pre that maiden resource. And so there is that initial bump up in value when you start to make this discovery, and really when you start to show the market that, okay, this thing does potentially have scale. And that's a big thing too, right? And so yeah, that we've been through before. That's kind of a high level strategy of what we would do. But the biggest thing first is just making that initial discovery. And this is the ultimate treasure hunt. That's some of the most valuable rock in the world that we're going after in that part of the world, in the Athabasca Basin. And so there's no guarantees. This is exploration. And so we kind of have this recipe that we continue to use. It's been obviously very worked for us in the past with our past companies, and we continue to deploy that to these targets that we have. But there is no guarantees. You can tick all the boxes of what you're looking for, and it might not be there. But then the next hole in the next area where it might ultimately be. And if you do have that discovery, you will see your share price react accordingly.
Man, after reading, studying a lot about your company, I do understand, but man, there's the part of it where I don't understand where, the drilling and you guys' skill level. Obviously you guys been doing this for so long, it is the ultimate treasure hunt. I think it must be exciting, even in a bad market where you guys have made discoveries, how excited the crew must get, like everybody must get when that stuff happens.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the group takes pride in, even across the space. I think a lot of the explorers and even the developers, take pride in, delivering value to that part of the world, in Saskatchewan and Canada, but also, contributing to this uranium boom by potentially providing supply for this growing demand. And so it's important. This is important work of groups like us, really, thinking outside the box, going and putting our capital to drilling and trying to make that next great discovery, because the world needs it. They really, it does.
100%. Uranium is not just very valuable, extremely valuable, definitely at this time of the world right now. So where do you think we are in the uranium cycle right now?
It's still very early on. It feels like,
Still,
I think,
yeah,
very,
very.
Yeah, it does. It feels like it's starting to hold steady, kind of in that $80 range to $90 range US per pound. And it's starting to stabilize there. And I think any future catalyst that can come down the line will cause it to bump again above that $100. And that seems to be a number that once it does cross that you see stocks really react. But understanding the supply and demand fundamentals, it's simple. There's growing demand and there's not enough supply, and there's not going to be enough supply for the foreseeable future until groups start making more significant discoveries. And so with that, you're going to continue to see upward pressure on that price of uranium. And simply put, it's honestly just a basic supply and demand gap that we're going right now.
I do want to ask you that, because something off you said, like, the demand of it and the low supply. Is the low supply because the lack of discovery that has been made in the past, and we're just not focused on it because at some point in the past we had a lot of uranium and now we don't, and then now in 2 or 3 years we know we're going to need it a lot? And so why do you think the supply is extremely low now? And then another question, this part 2 of the question is, where do you believe the uranium commodity price is going to be in a year from now when the demand starts to grow even more?
Yeah, and so I think, metals always undergo cycles where it becomes undercapitalized, and then supply dwindles, and then demand picks up again, and the supply can't meet it for a number of years, and then eventually it meets it, and it kind of goes back into equilibrium. But which uranium is kind of undergoing. It was probably depressed more than it should have been, for the past even 10 to 15 years. But the big X factor here is that the demand the new demand that's coming on, the total change in sentiment in a lot of jurisdictions amongst a lot of people, has created this, like I said, perfect storm where the demand is growing more than people predicted. And so, the usual supply and demand fundamentals, eventually new supply will be found, come online. It can't keep up with this growing demand. There's just way more demand coming down the pipeline than people predicted. And so it creates almost this immense amount of upward pressure that's going to continue to happen in the uranium space, and what can create a longer cycle in the sense that the supply is going to take a long time before it can actually meet that demand. And so it's just a unique scenario where this is occurring, where there's all this demand that people did not predict would come down the pipeline. And then you factor in the uranium scarcity aspect in the sense that, it's not like a gold or, even copper, more so, where there's a lot of it around the planet that, is kind of ready to be mined. I think copper is also going to undergo, a similar thing from supply and demand, but uranium is very unique. It's somewhat of a smaller sector, but now it's kind of being catapulted to being considered a main source of energy. And, with that, supply really has a lot of catching up to do. And so, yeah, that's why I think it has a long runway. As far as what it's going to do in a year, I can't predict that. I think there's a lot of games that can be played from even, people acquiring uranium that can temporarily depress it. But the reality is, when you look at it long term, from a year ago to where we're going to be in 3, 4, or 5 years, you're going to look back and say, wow, that's been a big run up in uranium price.
Yeah, and I'm not planning on missing on that. But one more question before we have to end it. When do you think we're gonna see like some results of your drilling? When do we expect as investors to see some results in the drillings?
Yeah, I think we should be on pace to provide an update here in the next few weeks to a month or so in the springtime. We'll be drilling through to the beginning of April, and then we would go back and begin drilling again in June. You take a break for what we call almost like a spring melt, with the snow and the ice up there, then head back. And our summer will be a larger program focused on Darby and Murphy Lake North. And so, yeah, we'll update the market throughout that time period. And so, like I said, this is going to be the biggest campaign for us as a company this year. We've had the healthiest treasury, and we're putting that capital to work drilling, because that is the biggest catalyst for us. And so lots of news flow coming up there. We also, in the background, have been doing some transactions where we've been, selling some of our projects, also acquiring more ground in and around Darby and Murphy Lake North. We're always doing that. I think I told you this last time, is that, we don't have a flagship project until we ultimately make that discovery. We take that, we have a formula for where we want to go, where we want to drill, and if it's not there, we move on to the next project until we ultimately make that discovery. And some of these projects that we acquired, we really like them, but we know that our capital is going to be focused on these other projects, so we'll still create value by bringing in a joint venture partner to put their dollars to work on advancing some of these projects. So it's going to be lots of news flow this year for us, lots of excitement with us drilling, but also some of our partner companies focused on advancing the projects that we did a transaction with them on.
Yeah, man, Keith, I really appreciate it. Look, I you know what, I'm gonna say, man, I want to reach out after the summer, since the summer is kind of like your biggest run at it.
Yeah,
and see how you guys go there, and then see what the results. And I definitely will be paying attention to news. Everybody knows every time they put out something, I send it to the entire group and let everybody know what they're doing, and definitely for the people that are asking. But man, Keith, I really appreciate your time. By the way, everyone, Keith is might be having a baby soon, so congratulations to him. And then peace.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenny.